Hi there, I'm Frank Giles, editor of Florida Grower Magazine. We're being joined today by Scott Engel. He has just been named the new Senior Vice President of IFAS at the University of Florida. So we thought it'd be good to have a little conversation with him today, virtually, as many of our conversations are these days. So we want to welcome Scott and welcome to Florida.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here, and I don't start till July 13th, but I can't wait for that day to come.
Just first to get us started, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, thanks. I never had any idea I'd end up in agriculture. I literally grew up in the city, Baltimore City, and I loved golf. That was my life's ambition. I really wanted to be a golf course, either a professional player or a pro. But I realized, fortunately, early on enough that just wasn't going to happen. As much as I liked the game, I really wasn't that good. And so the next best choice for me, because I still wanted to be on the course every day, was to become a golf course superintendent. And in the state of Maryland, where I was living at the time, that was taught at the University of Maryland in the College of Agriculture. So that's how I got into agriculture, thinking that I'd be a turf manager at a local golf course. Anyway, I graduated. I thought I'd go on and get a little more education, so I started on my master's degree. And halfway through my program, my advisor left to go to Virginia Tech, and my co-advisor happened to have been a soil scientist, a wonderful mentor, and a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and he just kind of won me over to the discipline. And from there, I went on and got a PhD in soil science, soil microbiology in particular. And as I was graduating with my PhD, my advisor at Maryland happened to have been leaving. He went out to Arkansas. And so I came back and took his job as a professor and later as an administrator for 24 years. College Park, University of Maryland. And then I left there in 2005, went to University of Georgia in Athens to lead the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences there, which I did for a decade. Had a wonderful time there. I loved Athens. It's a good school. And from there, I had finished up my 10 years, and so I was looking for something different. I wanted to do a little more international work as well, and I was fortunate enough to be offered a job at the International Fertilizer Development Center, which is located in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, but almost all the work was in Africa or a couple countries in Asia. And their focus was to help smallholder farmers, and these are literally some of the poorest people in the world, grow more food through the use of appropriate fertilizer technologies. So, and they did a lot more than that, but their fertilizer was their primary focus. So spent a good chunk of my time, probably most of it in Africa during that period. But it did wear me out. That was a hard job. I was literally over the ocean once a week. Wow. For over 3 years. And at that point, the Secretary of Agriculture was looking for someone to run the National Institute of Food and Agriculture within the USDA. I knew Secretary Perdue when he was governor of the state of Georgia. We worked really well together, and I had a deep appreciation for his support of extension and teaching and research in agriculture. I knew very personally how much he believed in it. He was a veterinarian by trade, a graduate of land-grant university. And so when we met, I agreed to go ahead and take the leap. So I've been here just a little less than 2 years now. And when this opportunity at IFAS came up, I wasn't really looking to leave the USDA, but it's also a position within IFAS that I have been watching for literally decades. I consider IFAS and the University of Florida to be, maybe the best agriculture school in the country. If not number one, it's number two. So it was something that, because of its breadth and depth and complexity, I'd always watched for the opening of this position. And so when it came up, I applied, and I was lucky enough to be selected for the position. I start on July 13th, and very much looking forward to get involved with agriculture in Florida.
Well, good deal. Well, congratulations and welcome to Florida. We look forward to working with you here at Florida Grower Magazine. One of the things that's huge here is water and the impact of nutrients and runoff with the blue-green algae and red tide and all that. I know you have some experience in that regard with Chesapeake Bay. Talk a little bit about some of that work that you did there.
Yeah, this was, well, as a soil scientist, I worked on nutrients, both macronutrients which would be nitrogen and phosphorus, and the micronutrients, things like zinc and copper. So I had a good disciplinary background in this. But in the early 90s in Maryland, the Chesapeake Bay was polluted, and everyone knew it. But there was an outbreak of a small dinoflagellate. It's called Pfiesteria, which is in Florida, by the way. But it was the first time it had ever been seen in the Chesapeake Bay, and it caused a lot of economic problems. It stopped all the watermen from working, whether it was fish or crabs or oysters in the bay for quite a long time. It had devastating impact on that industry. Everyone started pointing their fingers about who was the cause of this. Obviously, the eastern shore of Maryland grows a lot of chickens, so they're one of the obvious sources of nutrients. But there's an awful lot of people in that region too. There's industry, and so it was clear that we needed better science just to really define the problem. So in the end, everyone was responsible. The poultry industry, other agriculture, too many people, septic tanks, industry, large, small industry. They were all part of the problem. Hold on here. Let me turn my light back on. I'm in.
There you go. No worries.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
I hate these automatic lights that go off. Anyway, so we realized that everyone was a problem and everyone had to be part of the solution. So, as an agriculturalist, that was our job. We weren't responsible for things like industry or more point source of pollution. We really focused on non-point source. A lot of state money, a lot of federal money flowed into it. Chesapeake Bay really became the flagship for how to manage the relationship between water quality, and agriculture. So a lot of the technologies are used around the country and world today, the policies, even the funding mechanisms, they all came out of that early effort. So I helped certainly lead a part of that to make sure that agriculture was being fairly treated. We acknowledged that we were part of the problem. We did not acknowledge that we were the sole source, but we were also willing to do our part as farmers and agriculturalists to try to restore the bay. And indeed, it's working. The water quality of the Chesapeake Bay in Maryland and Virginia, and even a little bit up into Pennsylvania, is getting better now. It's been improving since the 90s. And I think it's kind of a success story for how when you really focus efforts on a problem, you can make a difference. It takes good science, it takes good policy, it takes good leadership at the state and federal level, but it all kind of came together. So I've been through it once. I see a lot of the similar issues in Florida right now. I certainly see a lot of finger pointing going on right now as well. And so I hope to bring some of my experience in having gone through something very similar to what Florida is undergoing now to the state. And hopefully I can help people understand how to deal with an issue. And that's not hopeless, that things can be done. It doesn't happen fast. Obviously, we're talking a couple decades, but you got to start sometime. And you got to use good science. And we certainly have better science now than we did back in the 90s. Our models are much better. The technologies are vastly improved. Even the funding mechanisms are more sophisticated now to support water quality restoration. So I'm pretty confident that Florida will be in a good position. And I would be thrilled to be able to play a small part in that.
Very good. Very good. Well, sort of dovetails into the next question. What are some of the challenges and opportunities you're most excited about as you come to Florida, jumping into and tackling them when it comes to agricultural problems or opportunities even?
Sure. Well, there's certainly, there's no shortage of opportunities here. And let me just kind of mention a couple of them. And this is not a comprehensive list by far. These are some of the things that have jumped out at me. I've spent an awful lot of time studying Florida agriculture the last couple of months, and I have a lot of book knowledge, but not a lot of practical experience. So, and I've been around long enough to know that sometimes what you read is not always correct either. So, I'm saying this with a grain of salt, but I'm pretty sure these would be common problems regardless of where you are. And one of them is the kind of the urban-rural interface. Some people call it the urban-rural divide. I don't really think it's a divide. I think it's just kind of that's too strong of a word. It's really just lack of appreciation between the two communities. And given that, I literally grew up in the city and I have owned a farm as well and been in agriculture, I kind of understand the how these two communities engage one another. And so that's, again, another area where I think I have some unique perspective that I can probably bring at least some sense of propriety to that issue. Another one that I strongly believe in, and I know that obviously all the farmers who read this, is farmer profitability. I mean, that's still kind of one of the number one goals of everything we do. If farmers don't stay in business because they can't make money, then none of this matters. So whatever we do, whatever technologies we use to clean up surface water or do other things that society has deemed useful, if it has a negative impact upon the farmer, then it's just not going to happen, shouldn't happen. And if farmers go out of business, things get vastly worse anyway, because we all know that farmers are the best stewards of the environment, given the amount of land that they actually control and lead. So there's a lot of things we can do there to improve farmer profitability. One thing we can't do is control prices. That's at the weather and trade policy and embargoes, things that we have nothing to do with and have no influence on. So we have to look at those things where we can make a difference, which in agriculture is relatively simple. You can either increase yields or you can reduce the cost of the inputs provided to grow those crops. And that's something where I'm a tremendous believer in trying to become more efficient where we can, because that's good for the environment, it's good for the farmer, and it primarily it reduces the cost of farming to the farmer so that their bottom line can improve. So how we look at inputs and outputs from farming operations will certainly be a thing I spent a lot of time on. And then lastly, I did want to just mention the environment again, because that's so important from the governor on down to make sure that Floridians have a clean and healthy environment. And how can we make sure that agriculture is a part of providing that to the state? There are issues, and we need to be honest, recognize that agriculture can be a source of pollution in certain environments. You can't really solve a problem until you recognize it, but we also recognize that we got to keep those farmers in business, and the only way we can do that is by making sure that they are profitable. But one of the things I've seen and that we've actually supported here at the USDA quite a bit are technologies that do both: lower input costs, but also improve the quality of the environment. It's not that hard, frankly, and maybe it takes some incentives, or maybe it takes a little more science, or maybe it just takes more education. But I'm pretty confident that we are going to move in a direction with agriculture where we continue to see improvement in environmental quality, and we will lower the input costs for farmers so that they can make more money at the same time. So those are kind of three of the issues that I think I can work on, because I have a unique perspective on those. But again, there's dozens to hundreds of problems that have to be worked on, and I'll just have to wait till I get my boots on the ground there and walk the fields and talk to hundreds and thousands of individuals who have an interest in this area, and before I can really have a sense where those precious resources need to be best deployed.
Very good. And that sort of, ag research plays a big role in, finding solutions to those problems. And one of the things I've noticed in recent history, and it's probably been around longer than I've noticed it, but it seems that research nowadays is so much more grant driven. I know a lot of the times when I'm calling an IFAS researcher, he or she's really busy, so I'm working on a grant, it's a proposal. And just what are your thoughts on that? Good, bad, or indifferent? Is it that's just the way the world works these days? I know your background, you funded a lot of research, so.
Yeah, we're currently the NIFA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, is a primary funder of agriculture research at universities around the country. Our budget's about $2 billion, so we do quite a bit of this. That is the way of the world. Frankly, that is not going to change. There's some good reasons for that. Competition makes everyone better. I think we all understand it, whether it's your personal life or on a competitive process for funding for ag research. There's nothing wrong with that. The conundrum we get into here is that not all research is the same. So if you need to look at fertilizer application rates on strawberries, NIFA is not going to fund that. It's a regional problem. It's important to Florida and a few other states, but that does not rise to the level of a national issue. And there are many examples of that where it's either a small issue or a regional issue. And so this competitive process that we have federally just doesn't work for those types of things. But if you go talk to a strawberry farmer or blueberry farmer and ask them, what's important for you, they're going to say, yeah, a lot of these fertilizer application rates need to change or may need to change because there are new varieties coming out all the time. So for them, that's absolutely critical. So we have this conundrum of we have a national system for funding high-minded science, but then there are local problems that also have to be addressed. And the answer here is we need to do both. We can't do one or the other. Those strawberry farmers need support, but we also need to be working at integrating artificial intelligence into farming operations. That's kind of a national issue. So how do we do that? The federal government can certainly fund those national priorities, kind of the high science. We never fund science, by the way, that is just what a lot of people call ivory tower or navel gazing, things that it's a cool question to ask, but once you got the answer, what difference does it really make? NIFA does not fund those types of things. We only fund things that have a goal in mind that will make our country better. In fact, we always have farmer representatives on our panels to kind of hold our feet to the ground, feet to the fire, to make sure that we are actually doing things that make a difference and that we don't get off into the weeds and some type of navel gazing activity. So we're going to continue to do that because we need it. But then the other side, fertilizers on strawberries, how's that going to get funded? It takes money. Research is not cheap. There are a couple different ways. Certainly the state in Florida provides a lot of the support through capacity funding already. That's been there since the beginning of the land grant system. And I think the governor and others in the state understand the importance of making sure that that capacity to answer and address Florida's questions will be there. The federal government does actually do a little bit of this. We provide what we call capacity funding. A lot of this goes to extension, for example. It's not a competitive process. It's distributed on a formula basis, but that's where a significant portion of the extension funding comes from. And then industry has to be involved, and certainly it is. There are a number of checkoffs in Florida that I've learned about. I've talked to some of these commodity groups already, and there are different mechanisms for supporting some of these real applied and urgently needed answers for these groups. And so it all comes to the federal funding, the state funding, the industry funding, the checkoff groups. It all comes together, and well, probably everyone agrees it's not enough. It's still a pretty good system. So we get those real applied questions answered. Fertilizers on strawberries. We work on artificial intelligence more at the federal level, and ultimately it comes together within IFAS and the land grant schools of every state. And it's really my feeling, and this is probably the main reason why I applied for the job, as the vice president for IFAS, is that there's no state in the country that does both so well. And I'll give you a good example here. University of California, maybe at Davis, might be the #1 ranked College of Agriculture in the country. I'm not quite sure I agree with that, but some people a lot of people would say that. But if you go to a farmer in California and ask them, what has the University of California, Davis done for you lately? They're just going to scratch their head and go, I don't really know much about them. They do great basic research. They've got a lot of National Academy of Science members on their staff. Florida, IFAS has some too, by the way. But they really focus on those high-minded, big science issues. They don't do nearly as much for the farmers of Florida. I'll give you another example, one that I think is pretty good. University of Kentucky, they don't have a lot of National Academy members. They have some, and they do some good basic research, but they're really well integrated with the farming community. When you're in Kentucky and you ask a farmer, tell me about College of Agriculture, they know they're a man or woman who's the scientist or their extension agent who are working in the areas that are important to them. So they're very, very grounded. Florida does both really well. I don't think any other state can make that claim. And to me, that's what makes for a great land-grant university, is that combination of basic and applied research. The basic research being funded by NIFA, or the National Science Foundation. The applied research being funded by the state, commodities, a little bit through the federal government. But it's that intersection and that nexus that IFAS does better than anyone else, literally in the world.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you mentioned some technologies here. You know, we write a lot about ag tech. What are some areas of ag technology that excite you?
Yeah, well, these would all be technologies that are just now being integrated into agriculture. It's probably not been more than 10 years. Things like robotic technologies. We all know we're going to have labor. We have labor problems now. We're going to have more in the future. It's not going to get better. And so we're going to need machines to take over to do a lot of that for us. How we manage big data. For instance, the National Weather Service provides weather forecasting data, but there are now entrepreneurs out there who are providing much more reliable forecasting data, and that's important if you're worried about a freeze, for example, when the orange grows. You know, getting it right is important. If you predict a freeze and it doesn't happen, you probably wasted a lot of money. And if you predict a freeze is not going to happen and it does, and you haven't protected your crops, that costs a lot of money too. So having much more reliable weather forecasting data, which comes from the management of big data. And then ultimately, this all comes together under this rubric that we call artificial intelligence. This data that we're collecting now is just too big to even organize in a way that you can understand it. And good example that the secretary was telling me a couple of weeks ago, that there are now tractors that take real-time ground sensing data, but that information is so dense and there's so much of it that there's no way you can send it over the internet. You can't transport it. And so the only way you can get that amount of data, let's say from Florida to California, is you load it down onto a hard drive, and then you have to take the hard drive out of your computer and send it on a plane to California. That's the scope and the immensity of the data that we are dealing with. But because this information is so complicated, humans can't understand it easily enough to make sense of it. And this is where artificial intelligence is developing very quickly. Agriculture, frankly, has lagged behind other industries in this area. We're more traditional. We're probably a little slower to adopt new technologies, but it's happening now. And things like robotic or self-driving tractors or combines, for example, they are, those things have been around for a decade now. But very quickly, we're seeing artificial intelligence being used to make sense of this massive amount of data. Florida's got a pretty good program already in this, one of the best in the country. The president has been working with within this. President Fuchs has been working within the state for the last couple of years and is building up a program in artificial intelligence. And we've been talking, I've been trying to make the case that because agriculture is still one of the biggest industries in the state, but has lagged behind other industries in this area in artificial intelligence, it's where we can make up the most ground. So we can get the most bang for the buck in agriculture by working on artificial intelligence. The automotive industries, the aircraft industries, most manufacturing has been using this for a while now. In agriculture, it's just getting into our sector, and we'll have more return on investment than a lot of other industries. And I'm pretty excited about what that technology has to offer for all of us.
Excellent. Well, you're coming on board here at unusual times in history with the COVID-19 pandemic. I know you're not really yet at the university, but what are some of the go forward plans as this continues to unfold?
But it certainly is an unusual time to start a new job. First of all, we're going to follow university policy. The university has some really smart people through their One Health initiative that have been on this from day one. And I would say we're going to follow their direction because they're the experts. We're not. But what we are seeing is that obviously students will be coming back onto campus at some point in time. There's going to be a hybrid model of online learning and in the laboratory learning. I don't know that I have all the complexity of how this will be managed yet. I've seen several reports suggesting that it will be a hybrid model. But we got to get people back together on campus at some point. We don't want to rush it. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things, and always we're going to keep people safe first. But as I said, the university they've got a handle on this. They've got some great people who have been there for a long time, who understand both the state, the university, Gainesville, and this disease. And so I'm confident that we have been and we will continue to get good advice. There is a bit of a unique opportunity here for IFAS. COVID has some agricultural implications, and that would require some research and some extension to make sure that people out in the state understand what we're talking about, and then even training students within the classroom. Worker safety, whether you're on a factory line and processing, or you're working in the field, we now know that we do need some better technologies to assure the safety of our workers. We've had to scramble and get those in place, and I think we're doing a pretty good job now. But we were not prepared nationally for this. Another issue that's come up, what about animal agriculture? Can animals spread these diseases? We kind of thought we knew that the answer was no, but there wasn't a lot of good data to support that. And so agriculture across the country has been working, whether it's the Agricultural Research Service or universities and vet schools primarily, working on that to show that it looks like it's true. This disease can't be transmitted by animals. And that those occasional cases where you heard about someone getting it from their dog, that was there was something unusual in all of those cases that they were able to track down. Just yesterday, we had a question, a trade issue. Can COVID-19 be transmitted in the food that you eat, especially fresh food? Again, we think the answer is no, but more research is needed there to make sure that what we think is true really is true. And there's probably lots of other things that are going to come up over the next 6 months. And this is all good because this will help get us ready for the next pandemic. We know another pandemic's coming, and frankly, this one was not Ebola. The lethality rate is still not even close to what some of those dire diseases could be, but the next one could be. And we better make sure we're ready by getting the research done now that will allow us to have that information.
Well, very good. Great conversation. I think we'll wrap it up here. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, I'm really glad to be coming to Florida to lead IFAS. It is a great organization. It's something that I've wanted to do for a long time. it's had great leadership. Jack Payne has been a phenomenal leader, and becoming number 1 or 2 or 3 in the country or the world for an agricultural organization doesn't happen by accident. It's because of good work by people like Jack and his leadership team, and all the faculty and staff and extension agents that have allowed this to happen. So leading such a eminent organization is just really something that I'm excited about. Organizations are never perfect. There's still plenty of things to work on. It's not like I don't have any work to do once I get there. But Jack leaves it in really good shape. And so I'm just looking forward to getting in Gainesville, becoming integrated into the community, hopefully buy a house soon. I don't even own a car right now. I've been living in downtown DC for the last couple of years. So just I walk everywhere. So I'm even trying to buy a car right now. So look forward to getting this next phase of my life started, and look forward to being part of the great ag community of Florida.
Well, we certainly look forward to working with you as you come here, and congratulations on the new position.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.